Hi everybody, I'm Lee, and this is a Geekshow Tabletop Roundup. Give us 10 minutes and we'll give you a bunch of random stuff about games you probably aren't playing, but should. The folks at Free League Publishing in Sweden have announced a couple of open game licenses that will be available for two of their franchises. The first is using the Mutant Year Zero engine, or just the Year Zero engine, to allow aspiring game masters and publishers to create their own games, that means their own settings, using the Year Zero engine. This is the same game engine that Blade Runner, Coriolis, and Mutant Year Zero are using currently. So the game engine is already there waiting for you to plug in your own setting, your own world. All you have to do is the world building. And for those of you who don't want to deal with the hassle of creating your own world from scratch, Free League has announced that their Dragonbane RPG is going to be open source for people to be able to create their own scenarios for that game. It's a great fantasy RPG, so all you need to do at that point is come up with your scenario, plug it into Dragonbane, and run the game. If you want more information, check it out on the Free League website. The folks at Wizards of the Coast have teased their D&D Open Virtual Tabletop. This VTT looks fantastic. It uses the latest Unreal Engine and, well, looks aren't necessarily everything when it comes to a virtual tabletop. I have a lot of questions about this, and while it does indeed look fantastic, the gameplay, in my opinion, looks a little bit limited. There are also some other concerns that I have. Well, for one thing, is it going to do anything other than D&D? No, obviously not. You're not going to be able to pull up the D&D Open Virtual Tabletop and get in a game of Pathfinder or Starfinder or, say, Warhammer Fantasy. This is just going to be for your D&D games. My other questions, now these ones I don't have answers for, are whether or not you're going to have assets available to you. If you were using the D&D Open Virtual Tabletop to do your own homebrew campaign, are you going to have assets available to you in this VTT that allows you to use settings that are available in the Dungeons & Dragons world? Probably. Are you going to be able to import your own? Do you program with Unreal Engine? Chances are you don't. I'm sure there's somebody out there that's going to be typing away, yes, I do. Don't tell me what I can do. Is this virtual tabletop system going to be adaptable and flexible enough for people who are not going to be buying into the bespoke Dungeons & Dragons content from Wizards of the Coast? A lot of questions there. I'm also fairly sure that there's some monetization schemes floating around in the brains of your Wizards of the Coast executives on ways to make this a big moneymaker. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some sales for exclusive Dungeons & Dragons miniatures that you can only get, say, at the Wizards web store. But we'll find all of this out as this continues in development. I hope this doesn't come across as too pessimistic, but I know at the end of the day, money is what folks are after here. What I want is a really good, really robust tabletop system. I would love it if it was compatible with other games, but that's the whole reason why they're making their own bespoke system. If you'd like more information about my favorite virtual tabletops, I'll have a video coming out here shortly talking about the best and all the rest. If you've been playing tabletop games long enough, you've heard the names Gav Thorpe and Andy Chambers. These guys were working on Games Workshop licenses towards the end of the late 90s, early 2000s, and they're responsible for what I consider some of the best changes and adaptations that were made to the core rule systems developed by Rick Priestley back in the late 80s. Now, Chambers and Thorpe have teamed up once again to create a brand new game called Zeogenesis. Zeogenesis is a game of big, stompy robots. I'm a huge fan of big, stompy robots, and I hope you are too. But it doesn't stop with, like, Battletech, where you just have the great big robots and maybe some tiny little unit bases. These robots are a pretty good, hefty scale, but they're also a small enough scale that you can have some significant looking infantry units and some vehicles. There's not a lot of information on the gameplay, but Gav and Andy were at Adepticon and they did demo the game, and there's some great looking miniatures. And we'll make sure to follow up on the development of Zeogenesis as it goes along. Atomic Mass Games has teased their latest exclusive offering from Star Wars Legion that's going to be debuted during Gen Con this year. It's called Strike Me Down. It's a diorama that fans of Return of the Jedi are going to find very familiar looking. It's Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker facing off against each other on the bridge of the Death Star 2. Is it a bridge? Observation deck? Throne room? Throne room of the Death Star 2, while Emperor Palpatine stares on in amused fascination. Either way, he wins, right? Although this is going to make for a very, very dynamic centerpiece and conversation item, you're going to have to go to Gen Con to pick it up, and if history has been any teacher to me over the last few years, even if you do manage to make it to Gen Con, it's going to be pretty hard to get your hands on. So get in line quick, or have a friend who's very, very persuasive. Let's take a look at the latest tabletop games available on Kickstarter right now. And of course, remember, pay your bills first, folks. Kickstarter is fueled almost 100% by FOMO, so while that all-in package might look very appealing, it's not going to do you much good if you don't have lights to see the game that you're trying to play. Catalyst Games' Battletech Mercenaries still has a couple of weeks left in it, and they're closing in on the $5 million mark, which is pretty impressive considering some of the heavy hitters like CMON tend to close out their campaigns in the $6 to $7 million range, and they're considered pretty heavy hitters in the Kickstarter market. Battletech has had a long and storied history in the tabletop market, going all the way back to the mid-'80s when it was pretty much a mech design free-for-all, but they definitely have their own unique designs now, and Mercenaries looks fantastic. Again, that's available on Kickstarter for another couple of weeks. Battle Systems' Maladum only has another couple of days to go, and this is not one of the big heavy hitters like, say, Battletech or one of the CMON games, but they're still doing pretty good. One of the things I love about Battle Systems games is that not only do they create some great looking terrain and miniatures, they have some really good game systems too. I've played Battle Systems' Core Space game, and it is fantastic. One of the things that I love about it is that you have this cardstock terrain that looks really good. I mean, from a distance, you really can't tell that it's two-dimensional assets that have been punched out and stuck together with these very ingenious little plastic clips. Maladum is following up on that, but it's a fantasy setting game. The miniatures look great. The gameplay looks very familiar. I swear it's just a reskin of Core Space, and the terrain looks fantastic. This is a really good way that an aspiring dungeon master can get a tabletop full of terrain for their D&D game or any other game system for that matter without breaking the bank. And that's what that was designed for, but it turns out Maladum is also picking up a lot of enthusiasm from tabletop fans. So if you want to get on this on the ground floor, get some extra perks for being a Kickstarter backer, you'll want to make sure you get over to Kickstarter and back this before the pledge goes down on Wednesday. And speaking of CMON, they've launched a bunch of teasers for their upcoming Kickstarter campaign for their latest Zombicide board game. This particular expansion is called White Death, and it definitely has some Game of Thrones vibes to it. You want to check out CMON's social medias or head over to Kickstarter to be alerted when this particular campaign launches. And checking out the latest news out of Games Workshop, a little bit quiet this week. There are some upcoming pre-orders for Sisters of Battle box set and a box of Necromunda Cawdor Striders. These guys, they go out there little walkers and act like zealots on the ash wastes. Great looking models, and I can't wait to get some paint on them because, well, I play Cawdor, so there you go. On the Warhammer community page, there's also quite a bit of information about the upcoming Soulblight Gravelords Battletome. Say that 3 times fast. And if you want more information about all the creepy crawlies under the command of Nagash, Supreme Lord of the Undead, head over to the Warhammer community page. While you're there, you can also check out the latest changes coming your way for Kill Team. There's a Kill Team Meta Watch article there talking about some of the balance changes and points alterations that have been made to Kill Team lists, trying to bring things more into balance, because despite what your buddy down at the game store says, Kill Team isn't the most balanced game in the world. Balanced? No. Fun? Yes. That's it for this week's Geekshow Tabletop Roundup. Make sure to like and subscribe for more tabletop news, but that's not all we do at Geekshow. We have a weekly entertainment show where we recap everything that's going on with movies, comic books, television shows, and games, of course. And we have some brand new segments coming out from some of my friends at Geekshow, including the Geekshow Arcade and Geekshow Help Desk. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. We'll talk with you soon.